YouTube Ozic going the Goat House is back. Waiver claim period has started. We're going to talk about the top 5 waiver claims. We're also going to go over notable veterans that have already signed. We'll talk about some intriguing practice squad signings as well, and then which are the best available players, looking at veterans and the younger guys that still have to be claimed or placed on practice squads. Matt Corral's a big one. We'll talk about landing spots for Matt Corral at the end there. So we got you guys covered, kept up to date on our Twitter, live updates, and more, so check us out there. There's a link pinned in the comments also on your screen. There's links down there for our sponsors and our social media accounts, trade grades, things like that. In-season content right around the corner. That'll be a ton of fun, so make sure you join us. But yeah, top 5 waiver claims, in my opinion. There wasn't a whole lot of action when it came to those waiver claims. At number 5, we go Kayvon Wallace, who's at safety / linebacker, can play in the box, can play in the slot, cover from the slot as well. I really liked his Clemson tape quite a few years ago. Didn't really work out with Philly, but is familiar with Jonathan Gannon's scheme, but was a little bit down the depth chart, the second on the depth chart. But the Eagles were stacked. Gannon with the Cardinals, not the most stacked team in football. So, Wallace could come in and contribute right away, actually. It's kind of like a hybrid type player. So maybe he can do what, kind of a coincidence coming from Clemson, but what they thought Isaiah Simmons could do, for them. And obviously they moved on from him. He went to the Giants. So a guy that can contribute right away. And I think a pretty good fit. And again, I liked his tape. He just hasn't really worked out so far in the NFL. And then at number 4, we'll go with Calvin Throckmorton, the tackle, formerly from Oregon, but was with the Saints. And he got some reps for the Saints, got some playing time. A guy with experience. He's not super flashy of a tackle, but I think it's a good piece to have in terms of depth. The Panthers on paper look like they can be pretty decent on the offensive line. They struggle a little bit in the preseason. A lot of young guys, a lot of questionable what we're going to get from them. So it'd be pretty good to have kind of this insurance piece as a depth option. So I thought that was a pretty good waiver claim. 3 will go Caillou Blue Kelly, who was a solid draft pick for the Ravens, what we thought out of Stanford. A pretty good press man corner, physical. Seahawks do tend to run a little bit more zone, but maybe they want their guys to press a little bit more in that zone. Maybe they want to add more man coverage, but a solid young player to mesh with the solid young corners they have. All their corners are just extremely young. Obviously, Tariq Woolen last year, Devin Witherspoon this year, and they have other young options. Kobe Bryant across that roster. So they add another piece here, so they can another good guy for them to work with. So that's he's a rookie. It's an upside guy. A lot of potential. So I thought that was a good pick up there. The Titans getting Kindle Vildor, who's been playing for the Bears the last few years, and he's got some good playing time, some good reps. So I like that he has that experience. The Titans, they definitely could have used the guy in terms of depth. They're set with starters, but a lot of their guys are pretty even. Like, Fulton may be their best corner, but, is a guy significantly better than the rest. It's kind of all open. They like having that rotation in there. They have a lot of guys that can play inside and out. I think you get another guy like that with Vildor to kind of mesh well with that rotation. So I think a pretty good fit. Guy with experience. I think he'll see some playing. I think he'll see some field this year, get some playing time for the Tennessee Titans. And number 1, before we go over some other notable moves or things to come, is Darius Rush going to the Chiefs. And I was actually, late, after I made that video yesterday, highlighting guys that were waived. Darius Rush, was after the fact, and that's it was a prospect that I liked. He was a receiver turned corner at South Carolina. And, so he has a lot of upside. But he played pretty well for that limited experience at corner as well, using his length, using his physicality, his athleticism. He has that he had that deep speed. Pretty good in press. Could get better, but pretty good, pretty physical, especially for just being a receiver not too long ago. I think he's good in man coverage. I think cover 2 would suit him well. And he goes to a team that runs both those. The Chiefs run a lot of man. They run a lot of cover 2. So I thought it was a good scheme fit. On top of that, again, tremendous upside. Only a rookie, but he was kind of one of those raw prospects. Like, you judge him based on the long-term future because, again, receiver turned corner, a lot of traits to work with. So that's good for anybody, but then you factor in it's the Chiefs. Again, we talked about the scheme fit, but a team that really develops these corners that aren't expected to be much, end up being much because of the Chiefs. So I think it's a perfect place for him. I don't expect to see a whole lot of them right away. Maybe you never know. Chiefs always got some random guys stepping up at the position, so I don't know how he fell to the Chiefs in terms of the waivers, the waiver order. Perfect fit. A lot of upside, solid rookie here. Yeah, the Colts got a really good draft class, so I guess tough to keep all those guys, but at the same time, this was part of, of why the draft class was so good. That they got a steal and rush. They're also thin at corner. And it's a guy that you just, I feel like is a guy you don't cut no matter what, like unless there's like an off the field issue. Because he is a raw prospect. We talked about it before the draft. He still is. It's just a fact. It's what he is, So, and I thought he actually played pretty well in preseason too. So that was a very odd one for the Colts there. So, kind of question it. I ranked them as the second best draft, but kind of question that one, But moving on to some notable veteran signings, we're going to talk about more here, but more practice squad signings, things like that. But the Vikings added a couple pieces here. We'll actually talk about the Vikings again, but in terms of veterans, Myles Gaskin, who got some good reps in the past for the Dolphins. The Vikings have been looking for another running back. They're going to have a pretty good rotation. We might see 4 running backs play for them, led by Alexander Mattison, but Gaskin could work his way up or could immediately be number 2. So that'll be fun for them. And then Quessenberry, which the Vikings are pretty much set at tackle. Obviously, they have a very good tackle duo, but they actually badly needed depth. They traded Verdarian Lowe for a 6th, and they bring in a veteran Quessenberry, for free, obviously, except for the money they have to pay. So that was pretty good. Not the biggest name. The Steelers get a big one, probably the biggest one on this list. They get Desmond King. And I thought about the Steelers could get him because they could get better at the position, but I think they're going to roll it. Chance Sullivan, slot corner. They brought in Peterson from Minnesota, Sullivan from Minnesota. They want to run more zone, more cover 2 specifically. It kind of made sense. You're bringing in Joey Porter, really made sense. So I thought they would roll at Sullivan, but it looks like he could be on the way out because they add a much better slot corner in Desmond King, who bring up the cover 2 again, kind of what I've been hinting at this offseason. Desmond King ran a bit of that, with the Texans, especially under Lovie Smith, that Tampa 2 defense. So it kind of all is making sense. Like they brought in Peterson, and I was like, okay, I think they're going to run more zone. They bring in Joey Porter, which some people have talked about him being a man corner. If you watch this tape, he's going to be a very good press zone corner, and I specifically like cover 4 and cover 2. And we saw him highlight in specifically cover 2 in preseason. Now you bring in a guy like this, Desmond King. It all makes sense. So we're going to see the Steelers. They were kind of more man coverage last year, but a little bit more zone this year specifically. We'll see some cover 2. I think it's all adding up here. But a pretty damn good slot corner. They add Trent Taylor to the Bears. Pretty good punt returner and a good depth receiver there. But the Bears been looking, Velus Jones Jr. hasn't worked out, looking for a punt returner. Brett Maher, who was on the Cowboys, but then the Broncos, but then he's going to end up on the Rams here and likely be their kicker. So that's an interesting one. And Philip Dorsett, which, isn't the best signing in the world, but he's a solid receiver with some experience, and the Broncos are extremely thin at receiver. So I thought that was one that was pretty notable as well. Intriguing practice squad signings, Bailey Zappi going back to his own team, Patriots. I thought he would get claimed by somebody. I mean, it's a guy that he didn't look good in training camp preseason, so I guess that would be why. But going back to last year, a mid-round rookie that gets thrown into a situation actually looks pretty good. I think that means something. There. So, does it mean he's going to be the best quarterback in the world? No, but I think it means something. So him making it all the way through and going back to the Patriots, pretty big for the Patriots. We'll see if they're done at the position. I don't think they are, and we'll actually touch on that a little bit more in a little bit here. But interesting. Alex Leatherwood of the Browns, I think, is perfect scenario. He hasn't worked out with the Raiders and the Bears. There's still the questions, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? The Browns, the blocking scheme is fantastic over there. They're very, very well coached. Very well coached across the offensive line. They can develop players. Just feel like they make players better. So it's a really good landing spot for Leatherwood. We saw a good DeJuan Jones was at right tackle, bigger body guy, not the most athletic guy. And Leatherwood, Jones a lot more upside. I think he's just playing some better already. But Leatherwood, bigger guy, not the most athletic. They can work him in try to develop him at guard, tackle or guard. Jabril Cox, who I was never really super high on, but an athletic cover linebacker coming from the rival Cowboys to rival Commanders. So that was an interesting one. And the Commanders are pretty desperate for linebacker depth here, so they get it. Some upside there. Titans getting Cade York was pretty interesting. I mean, he was a high draft pick for a reason and just hasn't really worked out. for the Browns, but I thought it was intriguing because the Titans just traded for Nick Folk, and they also add Cade York. He's on the practice squad, obviously, but kind of having that other option. But the Titans completely revamped their kicker room. And the Vikings, a very recent one at time of recording. Again, more of this is going to happen, so things will change with this video, obviously. But Akeem Adeniji, formerly with the Bengals and actually used to start for them, but they had to fix that. Obviously, they needed to get better. But going to Minnesota, I thought, to their practice squad, I thought that was pretty good there. I think he still has some upside. He's got some experience. He wasn't the best in the world, but he was able to start, for them for a stretch. And the Bengals haven't been too great at developing the offensive line, and the Vikings have developed two. The Vikings got a big-time struggle on the interior, but besides the point, they've developed two really good offensive tackles. So bringing in Adeniji to kind of be a practice squad for now, but potentially be a depth piece for them at that position, I thought was, somewhat intriguing there. Best new available veterans, since yesterday, I guess. So not talking about the guys like Kareem Hunt, Carson Wentz that been available. Kind of talk about the guys that not everybody knows about. But Bradley Roby, I highlighted yesterday. I think he's the number one available guy. Could be signed. It could sign at the time I'm recording. Might be signed by the time you're watching this video. But a slot / outside corner. Still surprised the Saints moved on from him. Christian Kirksey, which there's some news on him right before recording, which is a pretty good linebacker, just some durability issues, but he plans to sign to the Bills practice squad is what the plan is. And we see that a lot where it's practice squad first and then you bump him up to your active roster. We could see that with the Bills. The Bills could definitely use him, that he can help them. But going to a veteran going to a contending team, I think made some sense there. But that's the plan. Nothing is official yet. I would probably count on that happening, but somebody can swoop in and sign him to their active roster, and then he'll do that, you would think, unless he would decline that team. Rather than going to a practice squad. But, he could decline that team if the Bills kind of told him, like, hey, we're probably going to bump you up. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on there. And then Kenyon Drake, who I thought played pretty well for the Ravens last year, was surprised the Colts didn't keep him. He is still available since yesterday. Mike Purcell since last night. It was a late one. Who's a pretty solid nose tackle with experience. Not super flashy, but going to stop the run. Then Jalen Reagor, who isn't the best on this list, but he was cut earlier today when the Vikings added Myles Gaskin. So Reagor, he has the speed, the after catch ability. His problem is just running routes and just kind of being a smart receiver, reading coverages, knowing when to sit down, things like that. He was actually responsible for 2 interceptions last year because running, putting himself in the wrong spot. So a receiver definitely needs work. He has the traits, though, athletic ability for sure, but he is a really good returner, especially punt returner. So that's a guy, and there was some trade interest. So I think some team will bring him on for special teams. And then more that we talked about yesterday, other guys that I consider new available veterans, the best. Devon Campbell, I think, is a pretty good rotational corner on the outside. Emmanuel Aurier has some experience. He was better his first couple years, I thought. Colt McCoy, veteran quarterback, good kind of to have just in the room. And then Cam Irving, similar situation. He has a good depth tackle to kind of just have in the room, some experience there. And there's teams that need that depth. And then available practice squad candidates, and of course, keep in mind teams could sign these guys I would expect all these guys to be practice squad guys, but a guy like Matt Corral, they can sign him to their active roster. I would actually expect him to eventually be active roster. They'll probably sign him maybe straight to the active roster or to the practice squad and then bump him up. The other guys at this point, since they were not claimed, more likely just to be straight practice squad and stay there. But even veteran guys kind of go practice squad first, then get bumped up. Could be the case with Christian Kirksey. But Matt Corral, right before going to record this, became available. Maybe a little surprising. You kind of thought deep down it could be coming. But a guy that hasn't really got a full chance yet. I know they switched coaching staff to interim halfway through the year last year, and then again this year to Frank Reich. So Matt Corral's situation is, who does he fit? Like, what system does he fit? And that was kind of my issue coming out of Ole Miss with that spread Lane Kiffin offense. They get the ball out so quick, like a lot of slants. Just a lot of quick, underneath stuff as well. And he does have somewhat of a strong arm for, I guess, a thinner guy, smaller guy. And he is very athletic, but how many hits can he handle? That was kind of the issue coming out as well. But just trying to find that right system, because you can see it. And the college guys got to switch their system, what they, learn, what they know. all the time in the NFL, but he was one that, if you remember us pre-draft, I really had kind of a problem with it. Will he be able to run and be nearly as good in an NFL, pro-style offense? That was the situation. I thought was a perfect fit for like a Cliff Kingsbury offense in the Cardinals a year ago, and would be now as well, but obviously Cliff out of the NFL. So how many offenses would he fit? We're going to talk about Matt Corral in the next slide because he's an intriguing option that's available. Travis Gibson, I was shocked that he didn't get claimed because this is a guy that's very young, still has upside. His last year playing in that 3-4 scheme, he had 7 sacks. His 4-3 last year doesn't fit it. So he goes to a 3-4 team. He has upside, and he can help you right away. Talked about it yesterday. We had landing spots for him because I thought he was a highlighted one. But we had landing spots yesterday's video, the most recent video, but Jags, Falcons, Panthers, Rams, Ravens, Chargers, teams like that. So Darren Hall actually got some playing time for the Falcons last year, solid young corner with experience. Trey Dean, safety that could come up in the box, played very well in preseason. Dwayne McBride was talked about a bit in the pre-draft process, the running back from UAB. Minnesota, crowded running back room there. So physical back on the inside runs. Could he get a look for somebody's practice squad, maybe Minnesota's? Maybe these guys already signed. By the time I'm talking, things are happening rapid fire. Just wanted to get this out. But talking about Matt Corral, finding the right system is the tough part. I'm going to talk about the Patriots, though, because they still only have one quarterback on the active roster. And then Bill O'Brien coming in and running his system. Remember, he was with New England at one point, but coming from Alabama and that, system, kind of made sense here. But that could be the reason why a guy like Bailey Zappi is now on a practice squad where he actually played last year. Just a difference in system and coaches, Bill O'Brien being the big one and the new offense coordinator. So, maybe he can get the most out of Corral. Tampa definitely can use a new weapon here, a new quarterback here, because they have Baker and Trask. Corral could beat out Trask, or they can hold 3. He also can be a small trial see if he could be a guy of the future. And I think they're kind of open to running anything, mixing up a little bit. The Falcons were actually, it looked like they were very interested in the pre-draft process. They end up going with Desmond Ridder, and the Falcons still have that same staff. So I'm keeping an eye on them, but they do have Ridder and Heineke, so that's what's tough. Seahawks are very good at working with quarterbacks. They're very good at developing. Geno Smith took a big step up last year. Drew Lock looked phenomenal in preseason. So, is Drew Lock going to be around forever? That's kind of a big question. Do they bring in Corral, try to develop him, and then maybe they can flip him for something? Maybe they flip Drew Lock for something. They keep Corral. That made sense just based on their background. And the Ravens got a unique scheme. Like the quarterbacks that can run, I don't, their worry might be Corral. You have to be able to take hits in this offense. They want to do less of that though with Lamar under Todd Monken. But Corral, can he handle the hits even though he can run? It was a problem at Ole Miss. It's a problem now. We saw it year 1 with the Panthers. But I think you could run that Todd Monken offense, and they could be looking. They had some interest in Trey Lance, so they could be looking. Somebody else that we can put on the more landing spots is Detroit. They had some interest in Trey Lance as well. But San Francisco, good with working with quarterbacks. Maybe they see some upside here, bring him in as the 3rd quarterback, replace Allen there. And then the Broncos, I could see Sean Payton having some interest. Not really counting out the Bears right now. Just 2 quarterbacks. Could they bring him in to have him battle Bagent? They can keep 3. And the Eagles actually had very strong interest in the pre-draft process a year ago as well. So, and then the Saints did too, but the Saints have Derek Carr now and Jake Hayner now. They already had Winston. They still have Winston. So a little crowded there. Maybe for practice squad for Saints. We could throw the Saints up there as well. I'm kind of more focusing on who would bring them in for the active roster, even if I would expect practice squad right away and the bump up. But I mentioned Detroit, mentioned New Orleans. Could we mention other teams for potential practice squad? Minnesota, Indy. We can go all day. But there isn't a lot of obvious fits in terms of Bill O'Brien's system, maybe the Patriots, in terms of who had strong interest before the draft, Falcons, Eagles, and then in terms of a fit, we talk about kind of system fit for the Patriots, but a fit in terms of, I think we could throw the Ravens in there as well, depending on what Todd Monken wants to do. But in terms of fit of who works well with quarterbacks, who can kind of flip him or flip, somebody else, Drew Lock, talking about the Seahawks, although they made sense for that reason. The Bucks need a quarterback. So those are my thoughts on Matt Corral. A very interesting option that is now available. So a lot of good stuff in this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. More of this will happen, and we'll keep you up to date on Twitter with the breaking news, initial thoughts. More trades should happen. I want to kind of recap all the trades. We have grades up. There's a link pinned in the comments, but kind of give you my thoughts, like put it into words here. So that probably be the video we're working on next. And then next week, in-season content, season is starting. Cannot wait. Hopefully you join us. Like, subscribe, turn notifications on. It's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.